Let's find out how I shot it. If you're new around here, click subscribe because all I talk about is photography, lighting, Fujifilm gear. My background in photography is mainly in studio photography, so using big softboxes, umbrellas, very powerful flashes, using huge tons of space to create shots. And about 4 years ago I hosted a fashion photography kind of workshop in London. Got a load of photographers to come along, some agency models, I got makeup stylists, costume, everything. And we really went to town kind of making like 9 or 10 different looks. One of my favourite looks from that day was this dark and moody kind of image that we're looking at today. And I'm just going to break down how I lit it, what kind of modifiers I used, how to create the separation and get the lighting, and kind of walk you through the basics of how I see light, or how you can also look at any given picture and reverse engineer how it was lit. First off, let's look at the finished images. We're going to go for these 3 here in red. Press N just to put them up side by side on each other. And the look we were going for was really like trying to create chiaroscuro in the images. Chiaroscuro just being a fancy Italian word for light and dark. It's one of the methods you can employ to kind of create that 3D effect in an image. As we know, obviously, images are 2D. We can use a variety of different methods to try and make them 3D, make them pop out. We can do things like making the background blur with bokeh. We can frame the picture with foreground and rear elements just to kind of give it depth. Or we can use lighting in kind of stages, so we can light the background separately to the subject. That gives the illusion of depth or kind of drama. The chiaroscuro element of it comes in on these images where if you look at the background, you've got on the right hand side of the image a very dark background, fading to like a mid-grey on the left-hand side. But on the model, it's the other way around. We've got light on the right-hand side and dark on the left. These two like opposing gradients of light give the depth, and it gives kind of a distance from the background and makes it look really interesting. If we just go to any of these pictures, they were shot at the same kind of camera settings. They were always 125th of a second. That is pretty close to the sync speed. Because we're working in a studio, we don't really need to have long or slow kind of shutter speeds. We can keep it as close to how fast the flash wants to interact with the camera, and that reduces any kind of ambient exposure, any kind of lights or window light coming in. It just knocks them all out. We then chose ISO 100, this being kind of the base, the lowest ISO we can get in the camera. This gives the clearest images with the least amount of noise or grain or kind of artificial colours getting in the way. Downside to using a very low ISO is you need to have quite high powered flashes most of the time. And then I shot all of the images at f8. I was using a pretty nice Canon 70-200 2.8, so I definitely had the ability to shoot at a lower aperture, but I didn't need that background separation. Shooting at f8, kind of the middle of the range, not as closed down as possible, not as open. It's going to give me that sharpness. It's going to give kind of top to bottom, backwards and forwards. It's going to give sharpness everywhere. So there's very little blurring or kind of bokeh in the image. One piece of advice I could give you if you are new to studio photography is get your settings of your camera first, then adjust your lighting afterwards. Don't go the other way around by kind of taking a shot and then trying to fix it with your camera. You do that with ambient light, so sunlight or, you know, indoor tungsten light or something. Don't do that here. You have immense amounts of power coming out of your flashes, so choose the settings you want for your camera and then apply the flashes afterwards, and you can change them to taste. They can generally go kind of 1 to 100 times the power most of the time. That is the basics out the way, so let's go into kind of deconstructing the image and trying to figure out how it was lit. First, we just have a test shot. This was David. We were doing the shoot with him. He's an absolutely amazing, talented portrait kind of retoucher. He edits photos for a living for kind of magazines. We were hosting it together. So I just had him stand in. He doesn't look too impressed, but we can see that we had a grey background. This is just a grey paper roll down background. And we had the light to his left or our right, and we can tell that because we have a long shadow coming from his back foot off to the left. There's no other conflicting shadows going in X shapes or anything. so we can tell pretty confidently that this is just a one single light setup. We can also tell that the light was pretty directional, and we can do that by looking on his face. We can see it's nicely illuminated on one side and goes very quickly to dark on the other side. That's a sign of something like an umbrella, or a beauty dish, or a gridded softbox. And what we can learn from this next picture as well is we are modifying the light, we are flagging it. By flagging it, what we're doing is we're controlling the output of this flash. We're kind of telling it to aim in one direction and not the other. And we can tell that nothing really has changed. The settings are the same in the camera, they're probably the same on the flash. The difference with the one on the right is that the background's got darker, so something to the right of that flash is now blocking some light. This is typical of a V-flat. V-flats are huge polystyrene or wooden or some kind of board you can move, generally around 10 foot high by 4 or 5 foot wide, and they are black or white on either side. And their job is to basically block, like a wall, block the light from hitting certain parts of your picture. And you can flag things independently, so you can flag it so your light hits your subject but not your background, or you can create kind of a wall in between, so you can actually have a light hitting your subject, a blocking wall, and then you could have another light lighting your background, and you could have a gel or something. And because of this wall in between, the lights wouldn't really interfere with each other. So without even giving away how this was lit, we can see with kind of 2 or 3 pictures that it was a single light source. It was most likely a harder light source or a directional light source, and it was flagged in the background to black out some of the background, to reduce the spill, to reduce the light going onto the background. That's why it's a bit darker. What I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to show you exactly what happened. So we have a background, and then we had me as a photographer, really quite far away. It was probably 10 foot away at this point. And our modifier was actually a gridded softbox. A softbox is a very diffuse light source, and it generally has edges, so it channels the light somewhat. Different to an umbrella, which will bounce light or shoot through a light, but it will just go everywhere, like there's no control. Softboxes generally have edges where the light will start to get darker kind of beyond its edges, if you understand. You can further make that more directional by attaching a grid. It kind of looks like an egg crate, kind of what you put eggs in. You can stick that on the front of the softbox, and that will channel the light more. It will stop the light kind of spreading out in kind of a more of a cone shape, make it more directional. The advantages of using a grid on a softbox is you can get really dramatic fall off. So it goes from kind of highlights to shadow. That will accentuate that because it's channeling that light even more. So we had the softbox somewhere around the right hand side facing the model. I'm actually going to bring them forwards a little bit because the distance from kind of the background to the model, it's one of the key elements to get this dark and moody chiaroscuro look. So I'm going to say it was something like this. And then we had one of those V-flats, and we had it, let's go for a black one. And we would have had a black V-flat somewhere very close to the softbox on just the right-hand side of the softbox. If you imagine the light coming out of the softbox, it hits the model. Because the model is quite close to the softbox and quite far away from the background, by the time that light has hit the background, it's decreased in power, it's a bit darker, doesn't illuminate as much, so you get that darker grey. And then adding that V-flat on the right hand side, it really reduces the spill, it's really controlling that light. So by the time the light has hit the background on the right hand side, it's almost pitch black because hardly any lights hit it, it's been blocked out or it's been guided in a different direction. Then we got into the shooting, and you can see we pretty much just let the model have free will. She's an agency signed model after all. It's not really our job to tell her how to model, it's just our job to make sure that she's interacting with the light properly and that the garments that she's wearing, because it was a fashion shoot, are being reflected or being well documented. All of the ISO and the settings are the same, so the light fall off is going to be pretty much identical. She may take a step forwards or backwards, so you may find that the lighting on her face gets a touch brighter or darker, but it should be pretty consistent, and that's something that's pretty easy to kind of match in Lightroom or Capture One afterwards. You can see things like the crinkles on the floor as well, and the dirt, and don't worry about that. You can edit that out very easily in post-production. what we're trying to get is on the face is we're trying to get good formation of shadows. Now we can see, talking about those shadow formations, we can see on the image on the left that we've got this kind of little pocket of light on the camera left, so her right cheek. We can see it just beneath her eye, and that's kind of Rembrandt lighting. That's something that was used kind of in paintings and stuff, and it's a sign of the way that the subject is facing towards the light, and it gives this kind of painterly look. It's very classical, it's very interesting. On the right hand one, this is more like kind of split lighting, where we have one side of the face in light and the other side in complete shadow, so there's no Rembrandt triangle, there's nothing else there. So just by moving the model and telling her which way to look or have the body, over the shoulder, head up, head down, all that business, it'll come to you. And it is very good for just creating different kinds of emotion just by moving the face, really. The images that we settled on at the end, we actually gave to the model for the agency and for the website, were these four. We got some full lengths, we've got an alternative, and we've got a kind of a half body portrait. Now, the lighting on the middle two is pretty much the same, really. It's just kind of, you know, which hand you want to have exposed or not. The one on the left shows the details of the back of the body, including the hair, and the shot on the right is more of a kind of a portrait, more from a model rather than the fashion company, and that shows kind of mood and emotion, and it's a very flattering light. This is on the right, this would be loop lighting or paramount lighting, where they're pretty much facing dead onto their light source, so the shadows are symmetrical on both sides of the face, it's evenly lit, shadows are generally under the nose at that point. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more from the shoot, as I said, there was 9 on this day. We actually did 2 shoots kind of a month apart. It's got plenty of images. If you want to find out more about which kind of modifiers to be using and why, just click subscribe. See you in a future video.